Okay, and now we're finishing off the morning sessions with a panel discussion looking at when machines create, managing risk, ethics, bias, and privacy. I'm sure this panel discussion will make you think a lot, so please prepare your questions as well. And we all have a moderator here as well with us, which please welcome Firas Zaknoun, the Strategic Alliance Manager at MEEZA. Over to you, Firas.
The wrong picture. حاطين the wrong picture. Yeah.
Hello everyone. So am I audible? Just in case you're wondering, that's the wrong picture of me. That's fine. No worries. Mr. Firas Sulaiman, I think. Yeah. We always get confused. So just let me introduce myself quickly. My name is Firas Al-Zaknoun. I work as a Strategic Alliances Manager in MEEZA. And I'd like to welcome you all to this panel discussion where it's on a topic that is as exciting as it is complex. When machines create, how to manage risk, ethics, bias, and privacy. Now, we are living in a world where AI is not only actively assisting human creativity, but it's also becoming a creator itself. And this profound transformation raises many questions, especially how do we ensure that AI is both developed and used responsibly. Now, today's discussion will explore some of the most critical aspects of this evolution. How do we manage risks associated with AI-generated outcomes? What ethical guidance should govern its use? And how do we address biases that can creep into the system? And finally, and maybe most importantly, sorry about that. And most importantly, how do we safeguard privacy in a world that's increasingly driven by data? So, we are fortunate enough to have an excellent panel of experts, and each will give their own perspective into this conversation. Allow me to start with ladies first. Professor Renée Cummings, a professor in practice in data science from the University of Virginia. And she can bring an academic lens to the ethical challenges and, the technological potential of AI. And next we have Samir Safar-Aly. Please join us on stage. I want to get this right. He's a Counsel, Financial Regulation, Compliance and Investigations, MENA-wide, and MENA Fintech and AI Lead at Baker McKenzie. Pleasure having you. And next we have Joseph Abboud. He's a Technology Consulting Partner from PwC, and he can bring deep insights into how businesses are managing the risk and opportunities of AI adoption. Pleasure having you. Okay, and finally, Hassan Al-Khaja, the Director of Human Resources Information Systems Center in Qatar Civil Service and Government Development Bureau. Pleasure having you here. Okay, so over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we'll dive into this theme, engage with diverse perspectives, and hopefully we will leave with new exciting insights on how to navigate this fascinating intersection between technology, ethics, and humanity. So thank you all again, and let's get started. So I'll start with some set the stage opening questions, and if I can ask you as well, should you like to further introduce yourself to the audience before you answer the first question, please do. So I'll start with Professor Renée. The question is, how do you define the ethical responsibilities of AI developers when machines create content or make decisions?
Thank you so very much.
You're most welcome.
Is the microphone on?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much for that question. Let me say it's an absolute honor to be with you. So when we're thinking about the ethical approaches to AI and developing models, we've got to think about whether or not we want to create access or we really want to deny access. I'm a criminologist and a criminal psychologist, and I've worked in AI for about 10 years. I specialize in AI governance and AI risk management and really building trustworthy and responsible AI. So if we want to bring that ethical approach, we've got to bring a requisite level of due diligence, which is critical to the ways in which we're building. We've also got to think about duty of care, because we have an extraordinary responsibility as data scientists to ensure the technology that we're building is not only responsible and trustworthy, but we understand their liability questions as well. We also have to think about due process, which is so critical, because we've realized that algorithms have the ability to create access or deny access. And we've also got to think about questions around diversity. So for me, it's an interdisciplinary approach. It is an approach that really looks at responsibilities. It also looks at rights. And it also looks at questions around resources, which is so critical, because we have this brilliant technology that can also be very risky, but we also have a technology that depletes an extraordinary amount of resources. So for building these ethical models, we've just got to bring an approach that is not only inclusive, but interdisciplinary, and one that really understands the impact of this technology on humanity.
Thank you so much. Samir, Safar-Aly, if I can ask you, and I know it's a topic you're passionate about, according to you and given your regulatory and legal experience, what do you think are the main challenges facing emerging economies, not only to be late adopters of AI, but also to start the journey or be part of the journey of AI adoption?
Thank you very much. Is my mic on? Can you hear my mic? Can you hear my mic? Yeah, okay, great. No, that's a very important question, especially where we look at the development of AI between the US on one side, China on the other side, and emerging leaders in this space, namely the GCC and Nordic countries. We heard yesterday was sort of on par with each other, but that leaves out a lot of the world in terms of, emerging markets in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and even other jurisdictions in Europe. And when I think about this issue, it's like what the professor said. It's multidisciplinary. It has a number of different things to consider. Education being one, and the readiness of the regulators and the government being another one. As a lawyer, I like to look at different areas of economic development and civilizational development to see, can we learn or can we take a page out of the book of another journey that had equal or similar questions. I actually trained as an oil and gas lawyer. And when you look at, bear with me on this, when you look at oil and gas contracts, at the beginning it was just the countries that had the resources would just get a small royalty. This then developed with the nation-state era to include, no, well, we want participatory rights, and you are not going to own the oil and sell it back to us, or the gas, but we are going to own the resources and sell it back to you, the international oil company. And as we see contracts, concession agreements develop over time, we see countries, emerging markets saying, no, we have an agenda in terms of developing our own expertise, our own people, our own human capital, and also our infrastructure, whether directly related to the industry or not. And I think that a page in that book can be taken out when it comes to AI, in terms of governments looking to utilize AI and having global vendors, large-size vendors, and saying, okay, well, we're more than happy to explore the utilization of your model in our government services or in our industries. But what are you doing beyond just the simple commercial agreement? Is there a commitment to train? Is there a commitment to share resources? Is there a commitment to develop our pool of talent through educational programs, research programs, and otherwise? So I think that could be something potential in terms of giving access to AI, almost compelling the industry, like we saw in oil and gas, to do the same. And now what's the result of that? We have national oil companies, national gas companies that are leaders, if not beyond the capabilities of international oil companies.
Thank you so much. Joseph, how do organizations view the risks of AI creativity, and what frameworks exist to address these risks?
First of all, I would like to thank you for having me. I would like to thank the audience for their attendance. Just a quick background. So I've been in Qatar for almost a year, and I come from the GCC, where I've spent more than 14 years serving the KSA and UAE, and I can understand the evolution of Qatar, where they're focusing the digital agenda and so on. So I'm proud to be here. I think if we look at creative AI, and just for the audience to understand what creative AI is, it's another type of generative AI. And it specializes on creating creative tasks. And a simple example, if you have a system, this is where you input text, you get an image, where you input a text, you get a video, and where you can input voice, you get a product, and in most advanced cases where you can input a neural site, you get into intelligence. Now, creative AI is highly coupled with the innovation value chain, so it covers from strategy to go-to-market. And if we look at strategy, insights, concepts, designs, and go-to-market, we can see that there are a number of AI tools out there that serving creative AI. For example, on strategy, you have StratGPT. On creatives and designs, you have the likes of DAL-E2, and you have the Midjourney, where it creates advanced product designs. Now, the question is, what if creative AI disrupts human value and ethics? That's a question that we're looking at. And according to a recent OECD experts group on the AI futures, they have identified that the lack and absence of controls and measures in identifying and aligning AI system outcomes with human values are among the most top potential risks happening. And according to a recent survey done by PwC, where they have interviewed more than 1,000 CEOs in the US on responsible AI, they've looked at 11 capabilities on organizations, how they're adapting and responding to the content generated by AI. They have identified that around 11% only they have fully implemented AI responsible capabilities. So that shows that there is a gap where they're using these systems. However, are we ready to respond whether the data or something goes wrong? Now, I'll tap into more the risks foreseen by the organizations. And maybe I can summarize it into 5 points. One is that how this is disruptive to our business. So if we look at what AI predicts, it predicts that digital solutions will come at zero cost, meaning that the software industry will be disrupted. Second, if we look at it from intellectual property, ownership, and account, so how do we deal with the data from legality and accountability? Who's held accountable if the data goes wrong? And we're getting into copy infringement, and we're getting into many legal cases. If we look also at having the data biased, and we've heard about data being biased, and how can we make sure that this data is not culturally, ethnically biased? There are certain companies that are training data culturally and geographically so that you can use unbiased data, so that you have more trust in that data. Also, you have on concerns over data privacy and security. How can I make sure that data leakage is not foreseen? And lastly, I would say is around lack of accuracy. And this is where we hear about AI hallucination. How can we make sure that the data being produced is realistic and is not just something as a prototype? So, and this is based on the trained data. The more you train data, the more data sets are there, you're able to get more realistic values. Now, in terms of frameworks, I think the answer is that you don't have, it's very fragmented at the moment. There were good initiatives done by the AU where they have introduced the AI EU Act, where it focuses on high-risk systems, and it's a risk-based approach where they can put obligations and safeguards, how you can label and watermark content produced by AI. There are also other initiatives by the OECD and UNESCO on having some AI principles and standards. There are some countries that are adopting these standards and principles, but if you ask me, is there a holistic framework being adopted at the moment? It's still being evolved, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, Hassan, with your experience leading a major digital transformation project in the government sector, First, I want to ask you, how do you see AI playing a role in improving employee satisfaction and operation efficiency? And what measures were taken to ensure that this AI-driven decision-making in human resources specifically was free from bias and adhering to the ethical principles in the government?
Okay, if I divide your question in two parts. The first part, the user satisfaction and the efficiency. From our side, we define the efficiency like not only reducing the cost and time and effort. We take in consideration a top priority on that, the user experience and how their adaptation to the service we are providing, since we are providing HR service to run HR transactions and as an umbrella for entire government of Qatar. So we understand our customer first, taking in consideration their psychological part, what is important for them, what they are using, and at the same time, we are taking care of how we can do more with less. So when we started from last year, we said, okay, depending on our situation, what we have to do so we can do it right from the beginning. It's okay just to take a lot of time for the beginning, but we have to do it right. So from last year we started, before entering to the AI field, we started reviewing our system, enhancing the quality of data that we have, and trying to have the best people on the board, the right partnership with the different companies, SAP, Ma'lumatiyya, Microsoft, before even choosing the tool that need to be implemented and what we are focusing on. June this year we start working on AI initiative. After doing a lot of extensive exercise with different parties, we started last June. It lasts almost 6 months. We started with the top priority transaction where there is no risk for employee, so we can check the technological part and take care of user satisfaction. The first 3 transactions we saw like the most demanded transaction in the government sector. We focused on that, and we said, okay, we need to have the wow factor at the beginning, where the first impression is the last impression. So we launched only at the beginning only 3 services, which our customers they really need, and for us it was important to see how quality of our data, how reliable of our data, even our partner from different companies, it is reliable, how we can meet the NCISA standard, taking the consideration of the internal security section as well. They were part of entire journey, including even the PR, because implementing AI, it's not only about the data or even it's about the culture, the identity of the government, and what you have, how you have to publish certain service, taking into consideration the heritage, the culture part, understanding your customer. So it was a mix of huge effort between different parties. Alhamdulillah, successfully, in the first 3 months, we received a high level of satisfaction from our customer. We have done a kind of survey just to measure how satisfied they are, what they really need, do we really need to improve the first 3 services that we launched or not. The satisfaction level was really high, and we get a lot of new initiative from the end users, from the government sector, and we start working on that priority. At the same time, we didn't eliminate our own part, what we need, because at the same time, you need to increase the satisfaction of your customer, but at the same time, you need to govern their behaviors. Because as many people, or my colleague, they said, AI is very dangerous things. And if you implement AI just to say anything in HR world, it will be a nightmare. So we make sure that whatever is published, working with our colleague and policy department who are the regulator of HR law, we make sure extensive exercise is happening before publishing anything. And we review it even with our PR to take care of the government identities. And at the same time, we make sure the quality people, they make sure the wow factor is already there. So far, we achieved 13 services as we are speaking, and we are aiming for more. All these 13 services are great, are simple in concept from technical point of view, but we focus on the customer. Next year, we are planning to publish very complicated AI solution in HR field, maintaining the same satisfaction, because we were the first government entity in Qatar who are putting the AI tool where you can have the Alexa experience giving the command, voice command, to do certain HR transaction in second. And we, in the first 3 months when we launched the first 3 service, we saved 90% of people time, because you have they have the different option. Either you go do the transaction manually, going to several screens, or you can do it from one place, giving a command verbally with different accent, Arabic or English, and he can get it done to you in seconds. So in that way, we are maintaining, and we are aiming to implement more complicated AI
Thank you so
initiative.
much. Thank you so much for that detailed answer. So going back to you, Professor, and this is a question that invites you to discuss the intersection of data provenance, bias, and ethics in AI, aligning with your advocacy for data justice and responsible AI development. So in your role as a data activist, and I have to say that's a very refreshing title and unfamiliar to us, you've highlighted the critical importance of scrutinizing the origins of data in AI systems. Could you elaborate on how unexamined data sources can perpetuate biases in AI-generated content, and what proactive steps can be taken to ensure ethical data curation?
Sure, thank you. So we've come to realize that when you are thinking about AI, AI has the ability to amplify bias, to amplify discrimination, and to amplify systemic challenges. As a critical data scientist, one of the things that I really try to impress upon my students is the fact that when we are using data, we have an extraordinary responsibility. So it begins with questions around data provenance. You've got to ask yourself, what is the history of the data? So I speak about several things: data provenance, I speak about the genealogy of data, the anatomy of data, and the pathology of data. In the pathology of data, that's where we see the most risks. And you may or may not know that when we speak about AI and we speak about the risks, many of the risks that were highlighted came out of the US criminal justice system, where the algorithms that we've been using, and in the US criminal justice system, we have been using algorithms for over 25 years now, so it's not new. What we've realized, and I think in 2016, there was an expose by a news outlet called ProPublica that showed extreme machine bias when it came to the ways in which algorithms were being used for parole and used for sentencing and just used in the criminal justice system. So if you want to reduce bias, or if you want to reduce discrimination, you have got to think really critically about the data that you're using. So you've got to bring a very sophisticated level of due diligence. And that due diligence is asking you to look at questions around accountability and transparency, explainability, auditability, what kinds of impact assessments and vulnerability audits are you doing, questions around accuracy, questions, of course, around security and privacy. These are all critical questions. Questions around consent. Do people know what they're doing when they are using a particular service? Questions around compliance. So it's really critical to do this kind of work, because I always say that data scientists are architects of our future, and together we're co-producing. So as a data activist, what I try to encourage individuals to do, to understand that you're not only users, but we are all producers of data. It is our data that's being monetized. It is our data that's being optimized. But we're also seeing situations where data could be weaponized against us, where data could be used for profiling and victimization and marginalization. So it's really critical to have that understanding, and it's really critical to understand that data is now a question of rights. It's a question of access. It's a question of legacy. And one of the things that I always like to say is that when you are building an algorithm, you are building a legacy. And you have got to ask yourself, what kind of legacy do I want to deploy with an algorithm? Because we've seen an algorithm creating opportunities or denying opportunities. We've seen algorithms creating access or denying access. We've seen algorithms just undermining communities and their abilities to succeed. So
Exactly.
It's a big challenge that we have, but the exciting thing is this: if we understand the risks we understand our rights, and we understand the responsibilities, then we get to truly harness the rewards of AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Samir, now considering your work advising on AI applications within financial services and AI ethics, what do you identify as the primary legal and ethical challenges that financial institutions face when integrating AI-generated content into their operations, and how can they effectively navigate these complexities?
It's a good question, and I think financial services, like criminal justice as well, is considered by many legislations, including the EU AI Act, as high risk, that then requires an assessment. I think just generally on this space, I mean, there's a myriad of considerations. One is, of course, intellectual property. The development and the deployment of capital to develop AI, is the outcome of that going to be, copyrightable? And what we've seen so far is not really well, it depends on your position really, but it hasn't been one favorable to those developing AI models. And there's a big strong case to say that's correct, because so many people are saying my copyright is being used. There's a lot of cases all over the US, South Africa, UK, and China even, where they say, in order for an AI output, a Gen AI output, to be copyrightable, there needs to be a human element involved, right? It can't just be purely automated and then the product is copyrightable. And that's raised questions about, is prompting and curating the prompts and the inquiries, is that sufficient for the human element to tick the box to say, yes, the content is copyrightable? I've got an interesting article coming out, post really, on LinkedIn, where I try to talk about Islamic historical values when it comes to team building and diversity. Looking at classical scholars like, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, and Al-Ghazali, etc. And I wanted a nice generative AI model to go with it, a picture rather. So I asked ChatGPT, can you put together a picture that demonstrates the modern application and classical application? And I need it to show diversity. And it showed me a lovely picture of classical scholars on one side and business people on the other side, but they were all men. And I said diversity, and then I said, please, include at least 50% women in the picture. And then it did, but I said, well, I've said diversity, and there's only one color represented. So there are issues to consider with regards to and the big question is whether the prompting and the curating actually equates to the human element. That's one. And we've actually seen this, even though I've spoken about an artistic example, there are cases where people have used financial statistical data and have tried to use the same argument to say, well, and this is a case from China, where somebody used a Gen AI output from another organization, and the other organization declared that it has been created, put together by Gen AI. So they said, well, it was created by Gen AI, there's no copyright in that. And the defense in the Shenzhen courts was that basically no, the amount of prompting and curating actually ticked the human element. So it was copyrightable. Another issue is, of course, we're talking a lot about transparency. The issue about transparency is, and particularly in the financial sector, financially regulated institutions are required by the nature of being highly regulated, are required to be able to disclose and outline to the regulator, if not to the customers, why they made a certain decision, whether to give a loan, whether to mitigate risk in terms of treasury portfolio, AI-assisted management. So there is an issue there with regards to the black box, because even the explainable AI protocols out there, Lime and Shapely, they're limited in so many ways because they're mainly based on linear regression, and these are models that go beyond those requirements. So a big question is, for example, how to deal with that in the absence of a lack of regulatory clearance, regulatory guidance on this topic. And what we've seen some solutions that I've worked with some clients on are things like, for example, audits, but looking at things in terms of using, for example, synthetic data to actually test to see if there's bias, and then being able to retrain the model that way. Looking at, the way that a lot of models work is in terms of tokens, right? Tokens of information. And a lot of the tokens are a cluster of a huge amount of data. So whether we explore techniques to actually divide those tokens in sort of token pruning in order to get more accurate outcomes and disclose the touch points there. An interesting example, actually, in the world of human resources, which we were discussing earlier on, New York actually issued a law in New York City issued a law in 2021, where they said that for, and let me get this right, automated employment decision tools, EADTs. If an organization in New York City uses an AEDT, an AI-assisted protocol for hiring, that they would need to, within a certain number of days, disclose to the applicant that we're going to be using this data. B, they are obliged to do AI audits, and C, they are obliged to disclose data retention and a myriad of other things. With an enforcement mechanism, there hasn't been that much compliance with it yet, but these are just some ideas in terms of what we're seeing addressing bias and and on the IP piece, the sole issue, in my opinion, is a lack of coordination. Right? You got lack of discussion in the AI in the IP realm, and in terms of law commissions looking at whether IP law should be reformed. Human elements, sure, humans are required to create IP, but a corporate entity can own. It's a legal person. Should AI be a legal person or digital person? But yeah, a lot of discoordinated efforts, and I think a lot more conversations brought together is the way forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, Joseph, I know you've addressed it a bit in your first answer, pointing out that it's still in its infancy, probably as a proposition. But what role should governments and international bodies play in creating a regulatory framework for AI-generated content?
Okay. Maybe I'll start with some statistics, I think, because it evolves around those statistics. If we look at the value generated from the AI content, it's estimated in 2023 to be that was at $1.6 billion and expected to grow to $18.7 billion by 2030, so in the next 6 years. And that's with a CAGR of 25%. So how do we make sure that we have the cornerstone, the building blocks, and governing ourselves as an organization, as countries, in response to the behaviors that would come out of that content? So, and I keep hearing, and I hear that a lot, whether we go over regulation, we're under regulation, and there are different approaches, but I can see that the trends now is that how can I be pro-innovative, pro-regulation? How can I make sure that still opening the market for players to come in, but also I put obligations and enforcement. So if I would actually call 3 to 4 points around regulatory frameworks, I would say one, for countries to push national AI policies with enforcement on obligating, for example, putting red lines around AI use cases, maybe prohibit some certain use cases and goes along. And then how can we look at also embedding responsible AI frameworks within the developed AI strategies? So how can we make sure that that building block on responsible AI as a framework is embedded within the strategies that we're developing? Also, I would look at cross-country collaborations. We've seen where, for example, the US, the EU, and UK, they've signed a binding agreement on AI standards. And we've seen also as part of the global partnership on AI, where the US, India, and Japan, they have formed global strategies on addressing AI misinformation as a binding bilateral agreement as well. So we've seen these. It would be good to have this within the Middle East and the GCC. And I think with the Digital Cooperation Organization, DCO is pushing towards having more close collaboration across countries. The last point would be more about how can we create AI ethics communities. How can we bring the sectors, the industries, so that we can share the challenges and risks? And we're seeing it in the Middle East, where these committees, they are being designed so that you can address those challenges.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hassan, with the with the adoption of, with the increasing use of AI in HR management, how can organizations ensure that specifically the sensitive employee data is handled securely while also being utilized effectively for decision making?
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we check our data because the data is the main source of any AI. We increase the level of quality of data and we classify it properly. After that, we say how we can govern it as per the role and responsibilities, the job description, the role and response for each department, section, different hierarchy levels. So there are certain AI service we provide only for managerial levels, for head of section. And there are other services available only for employee. At the same time, we have quality team. Their job just to make sure that the governance of data is not breached and it is protected. And within the same organization, we have IT security who are monitoring each output of the system, and they are making sure everything on the spot. In addition to that, we have NCIC, the National Cybersecurity Organization. They are monitoring the strategical solution we are using in the government levels. Internally, we have a basis team. Where we put like there is a matrix about the job position, role and responsibilities in each organization, where the service is provided to specific people without breaching. Like, for example, like if I am a manager, I'm a director, I need just to get an information for my own employee, I will get it. If I try just to see other employee data, I will not be able. And even certain departments, they might have the authorization to generate a report through AI, saving time from them. It is only given and maintained on authorization levels. So those things it is in place, and we are trying to invest more in the governance of the data, and especially with the AI initiative, where we are going to put like more audit review by audit team, strengthen the audit department that we have with IT expertise on top of that. So with that, I believe we will have different filter levels from last year where we started, and as we go on the operational with the new initiatives. So I believe with that, it will be properly maintained.
Thank you so much. So of course we would have loved to spend hours with you just to leverage the most value out of all of your expertise. I'm going to ask the same question for all four of you, and if you can please in less than a minute although they have to make it up for me for putting the wrong picture in the beginning, but it's okay. So as AI continues to evolve and redefine creativity, now it's a two-part question. Where do you believe the line should be drawn between machine autonomy and human oversight? And who should have the authority to draw that line? I'm going to start with you, Professor.
Where do I think the line should be drawn? It's a question of trust. And that is the biggest crisis we're going to face as we move into 2025. Who is supposed to draw that line? I think it's supposed to be drawn at the level of global governance. It also needs to be drawn at the level of national governance. And it also needs to be a form of self-regulation. We need to understand the criticality of this technology. We need to understand that it is radical in its transformative power. It's going to do some brilliant things. If we're going to use it, then we've got to, as I say, always bring a heightened level of due diligence, an understanding of duty of care, and understanding critical questions around due process, which would be the rights, and of course, let's think about the resources. We don't want to deplete all the world's resources, and then we have this brilliant technology called AI, and we can't breathe. So we don't want to do that.
Thank you so much. So Samir, the same question?
Yeah, I think my perspective is, and some legislation reflects this, is whether something is high risk or not. If we're talking about AI in employment, AI in financial services, AI in other critical areas of society, then needless to say, I think that absolutely has to be a number of human-in-the-loop type concepts. But if AI, for example, is telling me what's based on what I watch, what's my what TV show on Netflix is the best one for me next, or if Amazon is suggesting me that you bought these products and I think you'd be interested in that product. This is not really going to affect, at least in my opinion, it's not going to be detrimental on society. I mean, when we take that argument further and we explore social media, that's an interesting one, right? And Australia is even trying to ban social media. If not, they might have already banned it, for kids under, people underneath the age of 16. So that's for me, it's about whether something is high risk or low risk, and then how we determine that. That's obviously a stakeholder discussion at a legislative level and community and business level as well.
Thank you so much. Joseph?
Maybe I'll take 20 seconds. So I think the best way, in my opinion, to draw the line is that through a sandbox. And I've seen how sandbox evolved from Fintech, now talking about RegTech. So how can we establish this sandbox where we bring the regulator, the private sector, the community, the academia, the research together, and testing what are the use cases and how can we actually evolve our regulations, policies, and deliver things after clearing up some clauses that could be barriers, for example, and how can we introduce other measures that can safeguard even further. So I think sandboxing is what can be leveraged.
Thank you so much. And finally, Hassan, where would you draw the line, and who do you think has the authority to draw that line?
Again, the question?
So where do you draw the line, according to you, between machine autonomy and human oversight, and who has the authority to draw that line?
I believe the regulator, for our case, it's the main regulator, the policy department, along with the legals. Normally, like the policy department, they have legal people within their department. And I believe like the main success will be dealing with AI, will be having strong leadership in place, then having the right people in place to deal with the technology. Because as my colleague, they said, there are thousands of AI tools in the place. But if you don't have the right people, the right partnership, the right leadership in place who are mature enough, understanding the AI risk and the pros and cons of AI, it will be difficult. Having the right people will make sure that you are doing the job in the right way.
Thank you so much. So I think we can have one Q&A from the audience if anyone would like to ask our esteemed panelists.
Firas, can I just mention one thing very briefly? In terms of the
sorry.
Yeah, in terms of the where should I was just thinking in terms of who should draw the line. I think we should draw the line individually, exactly. Because AI will perpetuate a truth, and are we accepting that truth, or are we critically questioning that truth? On what basis did you come out with that output? But
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Two points. First, we have to remember that AI will shape characters, personalities in the future, and it's very soon. Now, currently, because we still have a lot of people, maybe most of us here, has access to traditional way of traditional education. So when we get some answers from AI, we can question them, as Professor Renée mentioned. We should check if they are correct or not, simply because we have references, we have resources that we can go back. In a few years, those resources may not be available, simply because people will depend more on AI, or AI will be the source of those information. Currently, the new generation, and this is proved, that they are checking TikTok more for information and even news more than search engines or the news outlets. So first, how can we make sure that the young generation will not be controlled by other we have to remember something very important. We are not the producers, let's say, most of us are not producers of the AI systems. They are created and developed by companies. Now, when it comes to procedures and governance and all of these things, we are not, as a human, agree on all of those ethical or let's say, points of view. Every country has its own policies. Every country has its own way of life, and so on. While the AI systems are created by companies who might not think of the same ethical sets. So how can we control this? How can we be sure that we will not be affected by others to shape our young generation's minds and way of thinking? This is very critical.
Professor, would you like to answer
Sure,
that?
thank you. An absolutely fantastic question. It goes back to ethical vigilance. And I think what we're realizing now is that we have got to bring the question of ethics to babies as they're born, because they are born using the technology. There's no way we can pull AI back. There's no way we can stop AI. AI is...
Which ethics? Whose ethics? I mean,
well, I would say the ethics wherever the child is, right? Because we know that ethics could be very cultural. So wherever that child is, there are ethical frameworks. There are going to be policies around the use of AI. If that child is in a classroom, that classroom must have its own policy when it comes to the use of technology, the use of AI, and understanding the criticality of data. So I think the responsibility, of course, is always on parents, because the first exposure any child is going to get to technology is going to be in the home. It takes a few years before a child leaves the home to engage with other young people in a school environment or in a classroom. But the reality is, and I always say it, AI is a style of communication. Not only is it a tool, but it's the way in which we are communicating with each other at the moment. And that communication is only going to get more savvy and more sophisticated. So as we communicate in many different languages, as we have in this room, it is important for children to understand how to communicate with the technology, but understand the risks as well. And for them to become very savvy and very sophisticated in this technology, they must understand that they have a responsibility. They need to self-regulate, and they need to understand the impacts this technology can have, not only on their community, but on society as well. So,
based on what they don't have, they will not have the resources to compare to.
Well, we can't say they will not have the resources. I think it is now incumbent on the education system to ensure that that kind of literacy and context is also provided.
If I may add here, I think what organizations or countries can do is actually validate the third party, the data sources that are coming from third party, and put obligations on whether these third party providing these data sets can be used and leveraged before they're actually fed into the systems. And I think that's one measure that can be done geographically different from other countries. This is where I can see the trends, but maybe hopefully I have answered maybe the concern that you have.
Just to add from our experience to the point mentioned by the gentleman, and CGP, they feel the importance of AI on country levels. So this year, they published like a new job description, and new boxes for AI specialties. And at the same time, there is a project where they are working together with Ministry of Education and other educational and university in the country to monitor the people and make sure everything meeting the market need and without impacting the ethical part from secondary school. I can understand it's not covering for them the childhood, but I believe with my colleague, it is a responsibility to everyone, because one of the study I read it in in the future, majority of IT skills will be preliminary request to get a job, and by time it's becoming a skill everyone has to have it.
Fantastic. So I hope that answered your question. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your insightful contributions, and thank you for the audience. And forgive me for the shaky start, but it's no, you're most welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you. Pleasure.